this is a federal system. The analogy is if there were a presidential election in the European Union, you wouldn't necessarily expect the voters of France with their particular revolutionary traditions to vote the same way as the voters of, say, Estonia or Lithuania, for example. And likewise, in the United States, as noted, we already know what the results are going to be in perhaps 40 different states. And at some point, there's going to have to be an effort, particularly in those 40 different states, be it California or New York or Mississippi or Alabama, to start trying to build some sort of alternative progressive movement to rescue us from this crisis that we're now in, particularly at this moment when this never Trump phenomenon has been able to involve itself at the highest levels of the Democratic Party, which is in many ways very ominous. I mean, look at the latest book by David Frum, his obituary will probably mention that he was a speechwriter for George W. Bush and helped to coin the term axis of evil. Right. Some of the policies that he counsels for the Democrats, and of course, he probably will have a fair amount of sway because of his cachet, are quite dangerous. And particularly if you look at some of the hawks that have styled themselves as never Trump Republicans, such as Colin Powell, for example, whose obituary surely will mention his disastrous speech at the United Nations, providing cover for the catastrophic invasion of Iraq in 2003. Not to mention other hawks like Michelle Flournoy, who's scheduled to be the Pentagon chief under Biden, and Nicholas Burns, another hawk from days of yore. So I agree that we really have to be concerned with the correlation of forces and the balance of forces, and have to approach this election from that point of view. And even if you're in one of those 10 states where it's unclear who will prevail, I still think that even people who say vote for Biden, they should have a long footnote. I mean, for example, they should say something like, well, I know that one of the reasons that we're in this perilous moment is that the liberals, such as the ACLU, which purged communists, and the NAACP, which purged communists, and the AFL-CIO, which purged the left, tried to oust the West Coast Longshore from the House of Labor, that helped to disrupt the correlation of forces politically, creating the rise of this right, which has hampered labor education and has pointed a significant sector of the working class, particularly the Euro-American working class, in a conservative or pro-Trump direction. And so I know that this is what we're facing now is the historical result of these liberal blunders, which, by the way, are still going on. I mean, for example, oftentimes get calls from NPR to comment on certain issues. You know, they do the pre-interview. And of course, I'm candid and frank, which means I rarely get on NPR, because you have to be in a certain kind of a narrow range of opinion. And if you're to the left of that, well, you know, sayonara, goodbye. And that obviously helps to disrupt the correlation of forces politically, helps to reduce ideological space, political space as well. So once again, I think that if we're going to, in those particular 10 states, if we're going to counsel voting for Biden, at least give an explanation. Because otherwise what happens is that younger people, when they see people who call themselves radical or Marxists or socialists, and then they say vote for Biden, it leaves young people confused a lot, because they say, wait a minute. So give an explanation. Try to explain how we got to this point. Otherwise, you're giving a pass to the Democratic Party elites, because I think we need to face it, is that the Democratic Party, I guess it sees itself as sort of an African National Congress, which has communists and capitalists. The problem with the Democratic Party is that the former The radicals are not in the driver's seat. At best, they're a caboose on the train. And until that begins to change, well, then we're always going to be faced with these perilous moments whereby if Biden is elected, for example, you'll face this harebrained geopolitical strategy of trying to confront Moscow and Beijing simultaneously, which is a prescription for disaster. And once again, if people are going to on the left are going to counsel that vote for the 10 states, give an explanation.
So we don't wind up in the same place.